Welcome inside the Broncos podcast studio for another episode of Altitude Advantage. I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table, we have our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. The camera just knows to switch to you because then you're on. So if you're watching us on YouTube, appreciate you guys watching. You guys are listening. We appreciate you guys giving us your attention as we celebrate Dub Day here. 34-26 win over the Packers. The Broncos extend their winning streak to 11. They remain undefeated at home. And most importantly, they punched their ticket into the playoffs, which was something that is not necessarily on their goal list, but it is an accomplishment that I know Broncos country is very excited about. Yesterday's game, I feel, had everything. We're going to touch on that. Some of the big plays that we saw, Bo Nix's play, and so much more on this Dub Day edition of Altitude Advantage. But I know you always like kind of decompressing from the game. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, and we mentioned it last night during the instant analysis, which if you haven't watched, it's on YouTube and on DenverBroncos.com and so much more. Check it out, plug. But one thing you mentioned is that although the Broncos clinched, it didn't really feel that way for a moment, right? Like, obviously the guys were excited and they were celebrating and they appreciated the moment. But this team is so focused on the bigger picture that it's kind of like one of those things they're going to check off that leads them to accomplishing their goals, but they haven't yet accomplished them. And we're going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah, I think there's two big takeaways from this game. One is the reaction and what it means in terms of the playoff seeding, playoff positioning, all of that. Mm-hmm. And then there's what does it mean that you just beat a really good football team, right? And I think starting with the first point of what it means in the playoff seeding, what it means in the playoff race, I think you're right that, and Sean Payton reiterated that on Monday, is that getting to the playoffs is not one of the team's goals. Number one is winning the AFC West. Number two is getting the best possible seed you can get. And number three is winning a world championship. And so the Broncos are still chasing those goals. They're in position to achieve those goals and have put themselves in a good spot. Obviously, a 2-game lead in the AFC West, essentially a 2-game lead for home field advantage in the number one seed, which both of those put you in position to make a run at a world championship. But they haven't done those things yet. And I think it speaks to the goals of this team and the mindset of this team that a year ago, not a lot of expectations externally. This team believed they could make a run to the postseason, and they did that. And I think a year ago, and I know that once they got in the playoffs, obviously you want to win as many games as you can. You don't want to go out the way you did against Buffalo. But that said, I think it was a successful season in terms of making it to the postseason. This year we heard guys talk about this is a championship caliber team. This is a team that Sean Payton said it multiple times that they can chase a championship. And Greg Penner, Sean Payton, George Payton, they set the goal way back in January of, hey, the goal this year is to win the division. And so the goal was never just make the playoffs. And so that's why a win over the Packers, even though it clinches the playoffs, there was no celebrating. Adam Troutman mentioned after the game that it wasn't even mentioned in the locker room post-game because just the expectations have always been higher. And part of getting back to, we hear people talk about this a lot, getting back to what this franchise is all about means having championship standards and championship expectations. And that means that clinching the playoffs isn't something that it's something that should be expected and where you should be every year, as opposed to something that's worth, a big hoopla or celebration or whatever. And so if the Broncos can clinch the AFC West, which they can do as early as Week 16 this weekend against Jacksonville with some help around the league, if they clinch the number one seed, which they can do as early as this weekend, that's worth, I think, celebrating because that's one of the outlined goals. But in terms of clinching a playoff berth, that's not what this team has its eyes on. And I think that is, there's a lot of signs, right, that the Broncos have turned the corner and that they are ready to compete for a championship. I think their attitude and their mindset after this game, which is great. I think Sean Payton's direct quote was, "That's nice," when asked about clinching a playoff berth. This team has much, much higher aspirations. And I think that you look around the league at teams like a Buffalo, the Rams, obviously I know Kansas City has been eliminated, but that's a team that every year has championship.
Can you say that part again?
Well, I mean, obviously, first of all, thoughts you never want to see someone suffer an injury. And so Patrick Mahomes suffering an ACL injury is that was tough to watch. But yeah, I mean, the Chiefs, it's not about for them making the playoffs. It's about competing for championships. And Denver has been and belongs in that conversation based on this franchise's history. And they're putting themselves back there. And so I thought it said a lot about where this franchise is and where it's heading, that things were handled the way they were on Sunday after clinching that playoff spot.
On Monday, Zach Allen talked about how the whole team is really process-driven, and that's the mindset they've had all year, and just trying to go 1-0 every weekend. Like, that is the mentality they have. And you've heard that across the locker room when they say the most important game is the next one because it's the next one. There's no deeper meaning than that. And obviously, when you talk to the guys after, you mentioned not a lot of guys talked about clinching the playoffs. No one talked about even going into this matchup of what this game meant. The fact that if they win, they're in. Like, no one really talked about that in the week going into this Green Bay Packers matchup. What they did talk about after the game that a lot of the guys did and were excited about was the atmosphere. Were the fans, how loud they were, how they gave them energy, how they were giving plays. And despite the fact that they struggled early on against, Jordan Love, the way that this defense was able to make those adjustments and really kind of control the line of scrimmage in the second half of the game. But they all spoke to the atmosphere and the playoff atmosphere. And not necessarily this is an exact preview of what can be seen down the line, but more to the testament of this is what we're capable of doing when we're facing playoff caliber teams in these big situations. And this is also why head coach Sean Payton's goals are so important of winning the division, best seeding, and Super Bowl, because when you're able to play at home and you have your team rallying around you and your defense is making plays and it's erupting, it's loud and you're causing pressure and the other team is getting false starts, that is the goal. That's another almost goal that we want to have too, and that's what the guys all spoke about. The playoff atmosphere, the level of play they elevated to against a really tough Jordan Love-led offense and a top 6 ranked defense, and they're able to produce that on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that you saw the formula, right, which is secure the number 1 seed so that you play your games at home, because you're going to play teams like this, like the Packers, that have a high-powered offense, that have a good defense. I mean, you talk about the teams that you could face in the AFC playoff picture. It's New England, right, with Drake May playing as well as any quarterback in the league. You talk about Houston, who has potentially the best defense in the NFL, and C.J. Stroud, who's played really well as of late. You're talking about Jacksonville, who the Broncos will see this week and are just lighting up scoreboards. It's Buffalo with Josh Allen, who just played out of his mind again on Sunday against the Patriots and is a huge threat. It's Pittsburgh or Baltimore, who are
clawing their way back in.
Yeah, exactly. And tough, those teams are used to playoff football. It's the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh knows how to win in the postseason as well. It's these tough games that you're going to face, but when you're at home and you have that advantage, and then you have this ability, as we talked about last night, to wear teams out and wear teams down, and know that if you can get teams into the fourth quarter with a close game, that you've done this again and again and again. And Sean Payton mentioned it on Sunday night. This is how we've been living, right? This is the scenario we find ourselves in all the time. And so they're comfortable in that moment. And this to me was just a perfect path, a perfect preview of what could be to come for the Broncos, because, first defensively, I think while the Packers did score on their first 5 possessions, it is worth noting, and Sean Payton pointed this out on Monday, that 3 of those 5 scores were field goals. And so even though I think the Packers finished 1 of 4 in the red zone, even though they were able to get down there several times, the fact that you hold them to field goals, especially the first 2 drives, right?
Yeah.
Instead of being down 14-0, you're down 6-0, and then you're able to score a touchdown. You retake the lead. Even though they score a touchdown, you're still you're within striking distance that whole time because you held them to field goals and not touchdowns for the most part. And then in the second half, the defense comes alive, and I think that's a really encouraging thing to see if you're a Broncos fan, because you're going to see good offenses in the postseason. If it's a Josh Allen, if it's a Trevor Lawrence, if it's Drake May, C.J. Stroud, whoever it might be, Justin Herbert, who has just kind of willed the Chargers to victory the last couple of weeks, those guys are going to make plays. But we've seen again and again that the Broncos defense this year has found a way to make those in-game adjustments.
Yep.
And one of the things Vance Joseph has done really well is tailored his plan and changed his plan as the game has gone when necessary, to make sure that a tough first half or a couple of first half touchdowns doesn't turn into the whole game. And so you want to make sure that in the postseason, if there's a game where someone scores a couple quick scoring drives, right, or touchdowns, field goals, whatever it is, that you're able to adjust so that in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter, you're able to play your best football when it matters. And then if Bo Nix and the offense can play the way it did, that's kind of the pairing that goes well together. So I think had the defense kind of continued to play the way it did in the first half and give up scores, obviously every drive, that would have made things tough. But I think it's unrealistic to think against elite quarterbacks, which Jordan Love has been playing like an elite quarterback.
Especially in December, yeah.
Yep, that they're not going to have success, that they're not going to score. And so, and we talked about it coming in, right? They're going to make their plays. The test then becomes, can you, one, slow them down and make it field goals instead of touchdowns? And then two, can you adjust in game so that they don't just kind of start steamrolling throughout the football game? So I thought that was a really good sign that when you get to late December, January, hopefully February football, if you face a really good offensive team, yeah, this defense might give up a little bit as they're figuring things out, but they have again and again and again. I mean, just think how many times they've given up like an opening drive score. And it's mainly been field goals. It's just one touchdown this year on the opening drive, but they've always come back and figured things out. That's something that I think matters as we turn the page and head into the final stretch of the season.
I think this game on Sunday was a really good display of the depth of this Broncos team. Whether you look at the wide receiver position or the defense and things like that, PJ Law coming in for Brandon Jones and playing really well. Then you have Pat Bryant that didn't play. You have little Jordan Humphreys come in and really make an impact to kick off the game. In the first half, though, talking about Bo Nix's play, he was 11 of 12 with 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 148.6. in the first half. So you keeping pace with that. And then the second half, he only got better. And he obviously had 4 touchdowns in that game, ended up with over 300 yards. We talked about this in the analysis, 0 picks, 0 sacks. When you look at how Jordan Love performed, he ended up getting intercepted twice. He was sacked 3 times for 29 yards. He only had 1 touchdown. I mean, he only had a pass rating of 68.3, and we talked about that pressure and the fact that once this D-line figured it out and were able to get to him, there was no stopping it. And then after that, everyone feasted. You had Pat Surtain with a pick, which we'll talk about that because that's worth its own little segment on this podcast. But also Riley Moss getting an interception. I mean, just these big plays that really changed the momentum of the game. A lot of the guys talked about it after in the locker room. Pat Surtain's pick was the momentum change in the game. A lot of guys said that's why he's Defensive Player of the Year. We saw him go through his rehab to come back, and for him to have that moment, the play itself was spectacular. Nick Bonito said it was one of the best plays he's ever seen. But game-changing moments against top teams, that's what's going to carry you out. And for them to have that moment in a game where they were trying to figure out this offense, I thought was huge. And from Bo to this defense, it was a huge statement win from a very complimentary football kind of aspect.
Yeah, I think that you need to make those big-time game-changing plays, and it only enhances and goes up a notch when you get to the postseason, and you need your best player in Pat Surtain to find a way to get an interception. You need Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper and Zach Allen and JFM. You need them to get to the quarterback. You need Cortland Sutton and Bo Nix to make those connections on 4th down, and like you might need them to do that. Like 3 or 4 or 5 guys might need to make that type of play in a critical postseason game, or in a game like this Sunday coming up against Jacksonville that has 10 wins and is the 3rd seed in the AFC. Like, you can't just have 1 or 2. You got to make big play after big play after big play. And I think that if you pair that with then solid fundamental football the rest of the way, the Broncos have this formula of they do that, and then you get to the 4th quarter and you wear teams down. And Sean Payton mentioned it on Monday. By the time you got to the second half, the Broncos were winning at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
And that was on both sides of the ball. And normally you see that happen early in the game against the Packers, who are a good football team, a really good football team. And obviously losing Micah Parsons for the year hurts them, but it's still a talented football team that could go far in the playoffs. The fact that it took a little bit to get going in terms of the line of scrimmage is not an indictment on the Broncos. I think it speaks to how good the Packers are. But then the fact that the Broncos, despite them being good, kind of wore them down as the game went on, that speaks to the identity. And it's like, what is the identity of this Broncos team? Some people say, hey, it's good defense. It's Bo Nix, like, making timely plays. And I agree with that. But it's also that you wear teams down. And by the time you get to the 4th quarter, and this is because of the way they practice harder than most teams in training camp. OTAs are completely different here than a lot of other places around the league. They just lift and run during all of phase 1 and phase 2, right? Like, it's different than it is in most places. And the focus is on conditioning and strength and being ready to go for a season like this when you get to December and January and February. And so you need a performance like yesterday. That's what you need in the postseason because, and I was talking to Talanoa Hufanga because I said, hey, does this feel like a playoff game? And he was like, to be honest with you, like in the postseason, people make even more plays. And so you gotta enhance it even a little bit more I just think back to some of the all-time great postseason games, and it's like it's a touchdown here, it's a big defensive play, it's another big catch, and then you think about teams that lose Super Bowls and like how many huge plays did they make to get to that moment or in that game, and yet it's just like not quite enough because the other team made one or two more, and so it's a good sign that the Broncos' best players, whether that's Sutton, Nix, Surtain, Hufanga, making that tackle on a key third down to set up a field goal. Your best players are playing at a high level right now and showing up in big games, and you need that to continue to happen because that's how you win postseason football games. And so, I think this game was just kind of if you could wrap it up in a little bow, it is an example of how you can win a postseason game, a tight postseason game. It felt like a divisional round game, an AFC. Obviously, you're not playing the Packers in the AFC Championship, but it felt like that type
intensity,
of game. And again, you saw this team go down 9 points in the third quarter. It feels like it could get out of hand, and they just don't let that happen. And at some point, you're like, is this going to go the other way? And the Broncos just, they haven't let that happen. And
they've regained control.
And I think it's just, you got to enjoy this ride because it's now becoming a truly special season. And Broncos, 2 more wins. If they win 2 of their last 3 games, they're the number 1 seed in the AFC.
Yeah.
If they can clinch the division as early as this weekend, if they win and the Chargers lose, if they were to win the next 2, obviously they'd clinch the division anyway. And so everything is in front of you. And I think that nationally, the Broncos have been considered they're this team that's just won a lot of one-score games, and it's kind of this fun story, but they're not being given the attention they deserve maybe. Well, they're about to go take it because you keep winning football games here, you're going to get that first-round bye, you're going to be the number 1 seed in the AFC, and you're going to put yourself in a position, like we mentioned at the very beginning, to have home field advantage on your trip to Santa Clara. And you would just need to win 2 games at home to potentially punch a ticket. So it's an exciting time to be a Broncos fan right now, and I hope people are enjoying this really fun season.
It's definitely for us to enjoy. And I say that because when you talk to the guys, a lot of them mention, when you're in it, it's kind of hard to be on the outside looking in and how special it really is. And this is why when you reflect, you can kind of pinpoint those moments. But they're you learn to appreciate it. Cortland Sutton spoke about it after the game and said it's a hard feeling to kind of put into words about how special this means and what it means to be out here, especially for a guy like Sutton and Garrett Bowles that have been with this franchise, their entire careers and wanting to get to this moment. And now they're here. And so for them to kind of have that humbleness still and really just enjoying the process, that's part of what makes this season so special. They always ask, I'm sure you get these questions too, what makes this team so special? And it's those kind of players and the players that they have on this team and the way they're able to kind of talk about each other and hype each other up. And they definitely were hyping everyone up. As a reminder, Broncos, as we're recording this on Monday, it is the last day to vote for Pro Bowl voting. And all the guys are out there tweeting their highlights from Sunday's win to remind Broncos country to vote for them. I mean, Pat Surtain definitely did a Pro Bowl worthy play. I mean, when you really look at the replay of that interception, you tweeted about it. People have been talking about it. He literally flew 10 yards, Superman, literally just went and intercepted the ball. The athletic play that is at such a crucial moment in that game was huge. And those are the kind of plays that you just love to watch, and you love that they come at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Surtain is Pat Surtain. I think that, it was put that simply that did Bo say that it was a Pat Surtain play, right? And that's what you expect from him, but it was remarkable. It was athletic. It was a really special moment, and they needed it to win the football game, and everything flipped on that play. And that's, Pat, I think, has said himself, it's been difficult at times this year dealing with the injury, coming back from that and trying to get back up to the level of play he knows he's capable of. And he showed it on that play for sure. And good to have Pat Surtain on your side. Good to have a lot of these guys on your side. And now you just, like, I think one of the cool things is hearing from guys Monday, like, that was as impressive a win as the Broncos have had all year, in my opinion, just in terms of like the Packers being the second seed in the NFC and having Micah Parsons, who played most of the game before he suffered that injury, and Jordan Love, who had been playing, like we said, at an MVP type of level. They'd won, I think, 7 of their last 9 games, something like that. And so you've got them there, and you're trying to, as you go into this final stretch of the season, you've got the pressure of trying to close out the division in the 1 seed, and you're neck and neck with New England, and you can't afford to slip up, and you're in a tough spot, and you find a way to come back. So when you put all of it into perspective, with that game was as impressive a win as the one in Philly, as the one over the Chiefs. And I think you could argue that just in terms of what it meant and the caliber of opponent, that it was better than those 2 wins.
I agree with that.
And yet, Monday, less than 24 hours after the game, guys are like, we're on to Jacksonville.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, it kind of goes hand in hand with the clinching the playoffs and that not being one of the goals. Is like, these guys know what's possible ahead, and they do have that singular focus and game-to-game mindset, but it's kind of like, let's get to the next one because we're really going for something special here. And so there's an excitement, there's a an intrigue to this season, and excited on Thursday to break down a really big one against Jacksonville that, it will be critical either way, no matter which way it goes, and will be another tough test.
The Broncos control their own destiny, and that's something that they take very close, and they appreciate the fact that they have put themselves in this position in order to do that. And obviously, we're going to break down that matchup on Thursday's episode. But before we close this out, I mean, just looking at the AFC, a lot of key losses happened in Week 15. The Colts lost; they dropped to 3rd in their division. Jaguars are still atop at 10-4. The Broncos welcome them, as you said, on Sunday. The Steelers play on Monday Night Football. You have the Broncos 12-2. The Chargers, sneaking one out, ending the Chiefs' playoff run. They're 10-4. And just, you look at the Texans, you look at, the Bills and them kind of resurging after, kind of giving up a few games. It's going to be really interesting to see how this AFC picture plays out. But again, I think it cannot be stressed enough that the Broncos have put themselves in a position that they control their own destiny, in the sense of they're able to prepare as hard as they can in order to get the outcomes that they want, to reach that goal, as you mentioned, of winning the division and then getting the best seeding possible.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that any team even remotely gets brought back into it is if the Broncos go 1-2 the next 3 weeks. If you go 2-1 the next 3 weeks, you win you earn that number 1 seed. You win the AFC West. And so, obviously, you're not even thinking about 2-1, right? Like,
right, you're thinking about next game.
It's 1-0, and obviously you'd like to go 1-0 3 more times. But that said, like, you've put yourself in position, and with New England's loss and where other teams are, that you don't, like, there's been times in the past where the Broncos have been staring down a slate of games toward the end of the year, and they have to be perfect to, like, get to the playoffs. This is, you put yourself in a position where you don't even have to be perfect necessarily. And obviously that's not the mindset the guys are going to take. Like, each week feels like a must win, and they've talked about that because it's the next game. But I think the fact that you've essentially got a 2-game lead over New England because of the tiebreak, you've got a 2-game lead over the Chargers. That's all with 3 weeks to go. And so the Broncos are in a really good position, and it kind of depends where you look. If you look at DVOA, they've got an 80% chance of being the 1 seed. They've got a 70% chance according to ESPN and The Athletic. But no matter what you look at, they are in the driver's seat, the Broncos are. And like you said, they control their own destiny. They don't have to worry about what anybody else in the league is doing. And could some results help them clinch faster? Yes, but that doesn't seem to be their concern either. And so it'll be interesting to see how they come out against Jacksonville, and I'm sure they'll be ready, but it is going to be a difficult game, and you just hope that the Broncos can find a way to get another one at home. And then it'll be interesting as the season kind of comes to a close, how the rest of the race shapes up in terms of potential matchups. And if the Broncos are able to clinch that first round bye, you start thinking about, okay, well, who could be the first team to come to Empower Field at Mile High in the playoffs? And certainly a lot of different options, a lot of challenging options. You looking at the wild cards alone, like the Chargers, Bills, Texans, that's as good a slate of wild card teams as the AFC's had in a while. So it's a kind of a, I don't know if messy is the right AFC, but certainly it's a competitive AFC. And the reason the bye is so important is you take one of those games out of the picture. So hopefully the Broncos can take another step in that direction. They certainly did against the Packers.
Well, Broncos country, we will get you ready for that Jaguars game on Sunday on the episode we have on Thursday for you guys. But until then, make sure you guys catch up, listening to post-game locker room sound, instant analysis, the one-on-one I had with Troy Franklin, and so much more. So make sure you guys head over to denverbroncos.com. And don't forget, Monday is the last day to continue voting for our guys to go to the Pro Bowl. We appreciate you guys listening, and we'll see you on Thursday.